think then that we will, because there's a lot of talk about we're going to see a collapse of the current monetary system and we're going to see a new one emerge from this. I mean, do you agree with these type of statements that are circulating? Could you see that happening in our lifetime?
It depends on the time. Oh, in our lifetime, certainly not in my lifetime. I think that the current system that we have will have to bend to accommodate itself to the fact that the U.S., as an example, while still by far the world's dominant economic power, is a less important power than it was 20 years ago. So we're going to need to accommodate other cultures into the global financial system. As an example, a lot of people believe that China and or Russia are preparing to go on a gold standard. I think that's silly. I don't think that any politician in the world, American, Chinese, or Russian, wants to be constrained to keep their spending within the limits that are that are sort of designated by their gold holdings. I think you might see the Chinese or the Russians attempt to peg their currency to gold. But I don't, well, as an example, let's say, for instance, that the Russians owed you some money and their currency was pegged to gold. I'd love to see you try to collect. As a lender, I don't like confronting nuclear-armed debtors.
And if you don't mind just clarifying that, but from being pegged to being backed, there's no, like with the peg, there's no physical gold behind, every.
Correct.
Okay.
It's a promise. Rather than being an unstoried, unbacked currency, it's a storied, unbacked currency, just like the U.S. dollar was. The U.S. dollar was backed by gold until President Nixon decided it wasn't. When it became inconvenient to him, which is to say, when President de Gaulle said, your outgo is exceeding your income, we don't believe you can pay, we'd like to be paid in gold. Mr. Nixon said, too bad, so sad, we lied, strong letter to follow. And I suspect that is the response that you would get from every politician. Remember that the currency for politicians, what they live for, is power. And anything that restricts their power is a bad thing. And gold, having to back a currency with gold, having to live within the discipline of one's economy, having to live within one's means, is the most important detriment to power that exists in an economic sense.
Just want to get some quick thoughts from you. I know you don't talk the cryptocurrency world, but I just want to know, when you woke up to the headlines and see the crypto meltdown happening, what was going through Rick Rule's head? Was it, hey, thank God I'm not in this space, I feel bad for all the investors who lost tons of money? What were you thinking? Nothing? Something?
Pretty much nothing. In the 70s, Daniela, I was a fairly successful young investor and businessman. And I thought that my competence extended to areas that I had no expertise in. I even financed movies. And I understood, come the end of the 70s, just how smart I was, which is to say, not very. The consequence of that is that I try to confine myself to businesses and investments that I understand very well, that I understand better than other people. I am still struggling, somewhat successfully, to understand distributed ledger and blockchain technology. But I didn't understand the value proposition around cryptos, with the exception of the network effect. And in terms of the network effect, they were so far behind dollars that they couldn't see dollars. The consequence of that was that I didn't know enough about cryptos to participate to any material extent. So when they went up in price, it was of interest to me the same way a circus might be. I wasn't on the trapeze. When they went down in price, the same circumstance. I was interested in the spectacle of a whole bunch of self-appointed gurus who knew nothing about crypto on the way up and knew nothing about crypto on the way down, expressing shock that they got punished for holding an asset that they didn't understand. By the way, I'm not saying that all of the people involved in cryptos didn't know what they were doing. I'm only saying that I didn't know, so I stayed out of the way in both directions.
Well, let's talk about the field that you do love and know and are a master in, natural resources. You have a conference centered around this coming up July 26th to 29th in Boca Raton. Just an all-star roster of speakers, and I'm pretty sure uranium will be a big topic there, correct?
I think it will. Uranium, as we've discussed on your show before, is a commodity that I believe has to increase in price at a rate greater than the rate of inflation, because uranium has such utility in a world that's short electricity and long carbon. So we will definitely be talking about uranium, particularly now that the malaise in the uranium market is making investors uneasy. It's a wonderful time to talk about it.
Well, I also want, because I read back in June that the Biden administration is seeking $4.3 billion in funds to purchase enriched uranium and otherwise develop the U.S. uranium industry. And I never got your thoughts on that.
There's almost never anything good that comes out of the Capitol. All he really needs to do is get out of the way. There's a whole bunch of people that would love to sell us uranium. Including, by the way, the Russians. We don't want to buy it from them. But, the Australians have been pretty good allies. Every now and then, Daniela, we get some good things down here from Canada, yourself included.
Thank you.
The idea that we should spend $4 billion, whatever it is, assisting the U.S. uranium business, why don't you just get out of the way of the U.S. uranium business? You don't need to spend any money at all. You just need to get out of the way. For most of my life, when the government has decided that they're going to help me, it has hurt. And to the extent that they help me at the expense of taxpayers, I actually feel like I'm receiving stolen property. I feel dirty. So my hope is that Congress, in their wisdom, says, let's leave the $4.6 billion with the hardworking Americans who earned it, and let's let them buy electricity generated by whatever means from whatever source they feel is important. The idea that a cabal of big thinkers in Washington who have caused the inflation that we're facing now somehow can outthink 350 or 360 million Americans called a market seems extraordinarily unlikely to me.
Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice, if that could happen? But probably not, Rick. But
probably not.
Your conference is really like I said, you have